All right. So just to confirm, ma'am, can you see the screen and hear me clearly?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. All right. So up till now, what we had done were
I
questions.
just had one.
Yeah.
I just had one question before we
Yes.
start. So the recordings are in the same folder, CFA one level folder, which is shared, or is it
No, the
somewhere else?
recordings will be on the app. So this Saturday it will start uh, getting uploaded on the app. Every Saturday
Okay.
we'll upload the recording. So you will have it handy. However, the Excel file will be shared immediately. So right after class,
So,
yeah. Hmm.
acha. So there is a, what did you say? There is an app.
Yeah. You can just ping Avantika. She'll help you out with that.
हाँ ठीक है, I'll get in touch.
So
Okay.
she, takes care of all that. You can just reach out to her, and then she will tell you what to do exactly. So there'll be an app. On that app, you can see the lectures. So that should,
Sure.
yeah, be helpful. All right, cool. So up till now, we had finished certain questions, specifically with regards to definition of income, revenue, and some Schweizer questions as well. So this is the final file, which has all the questions that there are. Here we have all the questions relating to reading 28 from CFA level 1 financial statement analysis. So what we'll do is we'll just touch upon all the questions and then finally close this chapter today. Ideally, that's the idea. So we have around 14 questions from the core, and also we have quite a few questions from the Schweizer behind the chapter questions. They're also called as model quiz. So we have around 14 questions from core. So we'll start there. And some of the Schweizer questions are again pretty similar to the ones that we have in the core. So we will be complementing them, which will be a good revision. So to start off proceedings for chapter 28, let's get started here with the first question. Again, it will be a quick revision, but we are looking to ideally just revise them, touch upon them, and move on in detail to the questions that are pending. So again, firstly, the question here was under IFRS, income includes what? What does income include? So as we could read in the answer, income includes an increase in asset, an enhancement of asset, and a decrease in liability. So whenever there's an increase in asset, any enhancement in asset, and a decrease in liability, in such instances we say there is an increase in income. For an income to increase, one of three things has to happen. An asset should have increased, there has to be an enhancement of an asset, or a decrease in liability. These are the conditions that very clearly define income. So that's with the first question, that how do you define income? It's either an increase in asset, which is not given, or either it's an enhancement of asset, which is clearly given. So enhancement of asset is the right answer. And decrease in liability, again, it's not given. So because of the choices, enhancement of asset is given. Enhancement of assets not related to owner's contribution. That means the increase in the asset value due to favorable market conditions, good operations of the company, the value of the assets have increased, and that increase would be called as income. So we have a matrix here that help us understand the same. Whenever an asset increases, it's called income. Whenever an asset decreases, it's called as expense. When a liability increases, it's called as an expense. It's called as an income. Whenever a liability decreases, it's called as an income. However, when a liability increases, it's called as a expense. So this is a matrix that will help us understand the same. And something similar is given in LOS 28B, where when we read this, we'd get the idea of what is expense, and based on that we can relate what is income if we connect it to the matrix that I've given here. So that was about the first question, first answer, context of the entire question and the answer, and some explanations here. That whenever an owner contributes money, the current asset increases, because of which the total asset increases. But this increase is not called as income. And income is only an increase in the assets due to superior performance of the company, not because the owner put in more money. That is not income. When the company by itself, by its operations, when the company has done a good performance, that is called as income. So increase in assets due to superior performance is what we term as income. So that's about this particular question. Moving on to the second question here. So we'll stick to the core questions first, and we'll get back to the Schweizer questions. Coming to the second question here. So this is a question on net revenue. So what does net revenue mean? So net revenue ideally means that whatever revenue the company earned, subtract from that the returns of goods sold. So anything that has been sold, but there has been some returns of that sale also. So in your final balance sheet, the number that will be given should be given the number that is net of all these returns. So there are four things that you need to subtract to reach net revenue. So from your revenue figure, you will subtract one of four things. Any of the four things. It starts with warranty provision, customer discount, any return, any allowance. So if any of these four is given in the question, you have to subtract it with the revenue, and hence you will reach net revenue. So what is revenue? Sales. From the sales, we will subtract any of these four. What is these four? Returns, allowances, discounts, and provisions. If any of these four is given in the question, you have to subtract that, and the answer is the number that will be given in the financial statement. So what the trick of the question here is, they have given you some extra information. Example, cash collected and COGS that I have highlighted here. These are some extra pointers that they have given you just to misguide you and to confuse you. This is the trick of the question. Then when we want to find net revenue, we take the revenue and we subtract any one of these four that is given in the question. What could it be? Allowance, returns, warranty provisions, and customer discount. From revenue, we subtract any of these four. That would be called as net revenue. However, the trick of the question, just to repeat, is that if there's cash collected and cost of goods sold, this is just extra information to confuse you and to cause a error, to force an error. Also, we discuss about accrual basis and cash basis. Accrual basis is when the accounting is done of all the transaction, which can either be cash transaction or non-cash transaction. Any of the transactions can be recorded. That method of accounting is called accrual basis. But when we talk about cash basis, only cash transactions are recorded. If there's a cash transaction and there's a non-cash transaction, both will be accounted for under accrual. But in case of cash basis, as the name suggests, only cash transaction will be recorded. Okay, so that was about this particular questions. Any question, ma'am, up until now, whatever we've discussed?
No, I was present when this was
Right.
done. So,
Okay, that's positive. Moving on to the next one here again. Whenever there's an agent relationship between two parties, one is a principal, one is an agent. In that case, whatever commission the agent earns is the revenue of the agent. We'll take an example that I wanted to sell something on Amazon. So I am the owner of it. I listed my products on Amazon and I marked them at 2 lakhs. So Amazon told, okay, if I sell it for you, 25% of it I will keep with myself. So Amazon, yes, did sell it, and 25% of it Amazon kept with itself. That's around 50,000. And so this is the amount that Amazon will record as the revenue, because Amazon is my agent. An agent will record only the commission as the revenue. So that's the first thing. Second, in the question they can either ask you revenue, which I just explained, is that the commission that the agent earns from the sale that he made of my product, that commission will be his or her revenue. But in the question they can also ask you gross profit. So if they ask you gross profit, what you have to do is that whatever revenue you earned, if we look into this example, you've sold a house of 1.4 million and you've kept 3% of it. That means 42,000 is your revenue as a agent. You help sell the house. 14 lakhs is the cost of the house that you helped sell, was the value of the house that you helped sell. 3% of it you kept because that was the agreement, and that is 42,000. That would be the correct answer if the question was asking revenue. But as you can see in this question, they are asking the gross profit. So what you have to do is, from the revenue, you have to remove the expenses that have been listed here. So from the revenue, when you subtract the expense, the remaining 27,000 is the gross profit. There will be a very huge temptation to just put 42,000 as the right answer. But again, the trick here is read the question carefully, see whether they're asking for revenue or whether they're asking for gross profit. So that's with the principal agent relationship, that an agent will record the commission as the revenue. From the revenue, subtract any cost that they may have incurred, that will give you the gross profit. Trick again, see what they're asking for, revenue or gross profit. So again, we have a core question here as well. So there are two parties here. One party is the principal, the other is the agent. The agent here is Apex. So Apex sells the principal's good worth 20 lakhs, and it has asked for 25% commission, which is around 5 lakhs. So since there's a principal agent relationship, Apex is able to recognize a revenue of 5 lakhs, because whenever there's a principal agent relationship, the commission that the agent earns is its revenue. And if they're asking for gross profit, from this revenue you have to subtract the cost that the agent may have incurred, and you will get the gross profit of the agent. So this is about the accounting. Whenever there is an principal agent relationship, the commission that the agent earn is the revenue of the agent. From that commission or from that revenue, when you subtract the any cost that may have incurred to make the sale, the answer that you get would be the gross profit of whom? The agent. So in this question they have just asked for revenue, so you just put 5 lakhs. In this question they have asked for gross profit, so from the revenue you have to subtract the cost. So again, just be careful, what are they asking for in the question? Are they asking revenue? Are they asking gross profit? So that is about the third question. Coming to the fourth question now. Here we will understand the concept of capitalizing versus expensing. What is capitalizing? What is expensing? So capitalizing simply means that taking a certain expense to the balance sheet. Generally, all the expenses go to the P&L account or the income statement, as called under IFRS. All expenses go to the P&L account or the income statement. However, there are certain times when a certain expense, instead of going to the P&L, is put into the balance sheet. What are those instances? When that expense that has been incurred gives us a benefit that is for a period of greater than 1 year, or whenever that expense that is incurred helps to bring an asset into a working condition. In these two cases, in these two cases, an expense can be capitalized, i.e., it can be taken to the balance sheet instead of the P&L. Generally, expenses are put into the P&L. However, in these two situations, expenses can be put into the balance sheet. This process of putting expenses to the balance sheet is called as capitalization. And what happens here? That certain expenses which gives us benefit for greater than 1 year, they will be capitalized. Second, if there is an expense that has been incurred to bring an asset into working condition, those expenses will also be capitalized. So expenses under these two conditions will be capitalized. However, generally expenses go to the P&L, but when they are capitalized, they will go to the balance sheet. So that's the understanding that we would want to take in order to solve this question. However, if we just look into few numbers, we will get a lot of logic right. So back in the day, the previous rule was that all the expenses would have to go to the P&L, because capitalization did not exist as a concept. So all the expenses directly went into the P&L. If there was a revenue of 100, expense of 90, your profit would have been 10. Now after the rule that has come that certain expenses can be capitalized, so some expenses go to the balance sheet, not all go to the P&L. Because of this, the expenses have reduced. Before, all the expenses went to P&L. Now since some expenses are going to the balance sheet, the expenses in the P&L have reduced. That has increased our profit. So we can say, as because of the new standard, our profitability has increased. Because of the new standard, our profitability has increased. Because of the new standard, our profitability has increased. Because of the new standard, the profitability is increased. So that's what they're asking here. So as per the new standard, the profit will be higher as compared to the standard that was there before. So a company previously expensed, so back in the day they used to just expense everything in the P&L. Like we've mentioned here, all the expenses went to the P&L. So hence it's 90 here. However, the convert standard, which is the new standard, says that some expenses can be capitalized. So the expenses have come down and the expenses have become 55. From 90, the expenses have become 55. So now the profit has gone higher. So there will be a higher profit in case of the new standard as compared to the old standard. Okay. Next, we will understand in the fifth question. We will understand here that what is continuing operations, what is discontinued operations, and what is OCI. So whenever there's a certain line of business that the companies continue to do, it's not selling that business, it's not shutting down that business, it's continue doing that business in a normal way. Those businesses or those activities are called as continuing operations. However, if a company has closed a business, it's no longer wanting to operate it, and it has either sold it or it has held for sale, it's in the process of being sold, those operations are called discontinued operations. And lastly, other comprehensive income. If there is an income or an expense that is unrealized, What is unrealized? That we've got it on the book, but we've not got it in our pocket. Such expenses are ideally put under other comprehensive income. Right? On paper, we have received that income, but in real, that money is not hit our bank account or our pockets. But on paper, we have earned that income. So those
So
kind
it
of
is
income,
something
yeah.
similar to say what we were talking of accrual.
Wow, that's a very good connection that you've made. Absolutely, ma'am. The concepts are similar in nature. However, under the accrual accounting, those expenses can be in P&L also, they can be in OCI also. They don't have to be realized or unrealized to go into
Mm-hmm.
the OCI. So under accrual accounting, we take cash and non-cash, both the transactions. So that's with accrual. However, if anything is a non-cash transaction, like we know, if something is non-cash, so those transactions which are non-cash in nature, ideally are expenses that we have incurred. They have already happened. So they will be recorded in our P&L itself because those expenses have already incurred. So we will put, like for example, let's talk in examples. I think it will be easier. That accrual concept says, I'll just go back to that slide as well. Yeah. So accrual says I take both cash transaction and non-cash transaction. That is the logic of accrual. That we will consider cash transaction and non-cash transactions. What OCI says is that OCI is a account, whereas accrual is a framework, and both are very similar. It's just two separate things which have the similar logic. That's all it is. OCI is just an account name. Like P&L
Yeah,
account, OCI
this
is
is
just
the
an account. Accrual is a basis of accounting.
accounting.
That's it. So very similar, and hence that just shows that you've really understood it well. That's really positive to know. So it's pretty similar in terms of their framework. However, the only difference is one is an accounting method. However, one is an accounting method and the other is a account name. So OCI is just the name of an account. Moving on. So here we've understood what is OCI. Then we go to discontinued operations. Now, what is discontinued operation? Discontinued operations are operations that have either we've sold it off or they're in the process of being sold off. They are held for sale. Such operations come under discontinued operations. And then we have continuing operations. What are continuing operations? Continuing operations are operations which we are currently doing. We have not sold it. We have no intention to sell it. We have not made any announcement also. So we are still doing that business. So they are called continuing operations. So here they are telling there has been a loss of fire. They are not specifically mentioning anything. They are just saying there has been a loss due to fire. So when they do not say anything, we assume it to be continuing operations. Unless otherwise mentioned, an operation will be continuing operation. So here the operation is a continuing operation. So a loss from the destruction of property in a fire would most likely be classified as continuing operations. So there was a company that has certain activities going on, economic activities, and now there has been some loss because of fire. Nothing else mentioned, so we will assume that it's a continuing operations, and the loss would be calculated under loss as a result of continuing operations itself. So that is with this logic. Moving on to next set of questions where we have accounting estimates, accounting policy, and change in prior period error. So this is the concept that we will understand and immediately apply it in a sum. So whenever you see a balance sheet, you will notice that there are two sets of numbers that are given. One set of number is of this year and the other set of numbers are of the previous year. They are called as comparatives. 2 years data will be given. One is this year's data as of the year end and the data as per the previous year's year end. So basically they are telling us starting of the year what were the numbers, end of the year what were the numbers. That is why they gave us two sets of data always in a balance sheet. Starting of the year what was the numbers and end of the year what were the numbers. The starting of the year is nothing but previous year's ending numbers would be this year's starting numbers. So they give previous year's ending numbers versus this year's ending numbers. Two sets of numbers will be given for all the particulars such as revenue, sales, gross margin, operating margin, net margin, tax, interest. For everything, two sets of data, one of previous year, one of this year. So now they're telling that if in this year you have changed an accounting policy, so what you have to do is you have to change the previous year data also. Whenever you have changed the accounting policy in this year, you have to change the data of the previous year and then do your analysis. When you have two sets of data, you have made some change already, you have made it in this year, and you have made your accounts based on that changed accounting policy. What you have to do is when you're doing the comparison, you have to change the previous year's data also and then do the analysis or the comparison. So this is called as a retrospective effect. Whenever there's a change in accounting policy, there will be a retrospective effect. What does that mean? That this year, so obviously you've made in the new accounting policy. However, the previous year also, whatever data was given, you have to adjust it and then compare it. You have to adjust it and then compare it. Adjust for what? This change in accounting policy. Previous year they were using another method of depreciation. This year they're using another method of depreciation. So this year to you anyway use the new method of depreciation, but now you have to go back and calculate the depreciation of the previous year in the new way that you have started doing this year. Only then you will be able to better compare and better calculate and better analyze. So whenever there's a change in accounting policy, there will be a retrospective application. Right, you will change obviously this year's data, so you've anyway made it using the new policy. Previous year data also you have to go and change and only then do any comparison. But when there is a change in estimate, it only has a prospective effect. That only this year you took the new estimate and you changed. No need to go back and make any changes in the previous year data that is given to you. That is called as a prospective change. Whenever you have changed an estimate, that is a prospective change. Whenever you've changed an accounting policy, that's a retrospective. However, in the exam, they'll clearly mention accounting policy or estimate. So you don't need to worry about which is an estimate and what is an accounting policy. Okay, they'll clearly mention accounting policy or estimate. So if they're talking about accounting policy, the application of the change would be retrospectively. But whenever we're talking about estimate, the application of the change would be prospectively. So that is the meaning of retrospective and prospective. So when we talk about retrospective, the change would be in the previous year data and this year data. And when we talk about prospective, the change would be in this year data only. No effect of it will go to the previous year data. Next is prior period error. There were some errors in the previous year data that were there and that has come to light. So because of this, you have to change the previous year data obviously because the error came from there. But also you have to change your current year data because the previous year closing was this year's opening. So if there was a prior period error that has come to light, not only you have to change the previous year data, you will also have to make adjustments for the same in the current year data. And also you have to make a disclosure for the same. That this was the error that we found out on the previous information. We have changed these numbers and also we have changed these numbers. These numbers related to previous year, these numbers related to current year. And this is the net effect because of the change. So you have to give a disclosure also for that. Okay. So any questions, ma'am, on these three?
The second one,
Yeah.
can you please repeat this one, please?
Yeah. So whenever there's a change in estimate, what you have to do is that this year's data you have prepared based on the changed estimate. There was an estimate, for example, an asset in the previous year you told had a useful life of 15 years.
Hmm.
However, in this year you're telling that asset has a useful life of only 12 years.
Hmm.
We don't think it's 15 anymore, it's 12. So now
Hmm.
what you have done is when you're calculating the depreciation, you took the useful life as 12, which in the previous year was taken as 15. You this year you
So
just took
future
it as
maybe I have to take the same similar
yeah,
assumption.
going forward also you will have to take the same, whatever change you have made in this year.
Okay.
However, though you made the change this year, the previous year data will not get affected. Here we talk only about past versus current. When we talk about application estimate, accounting policy estimate and prior period error, we have nothing to do with the future periods. The only thing we're talking about is past data and current year data. Only these two data we are considering. Because in the balance sheet or in the financial statement, if you ever notice, as we do the sums, you will notice that there will always be two sets of data given. One
Mm-hmm.
would be of the past year, one would be of the current year. Why past year? Because past year is the current year's opening. So when we
Right.
say past year data, that would be the current year's opening. And when we say current year data, it would be the current year's ending. So you'll have two sets of data given, something like this, 2005 and 2006. So 2005, these were our sales. 2005, this was our COGS. And 2005, this was our gross profit. So you can just say previous year it was 100, this was 80, this was 20. This year the same thing is 150 and this is 100, profit is 50. So like this 2 years data will be given to you. So now whenever there's a change in accounting policy, so you have to change the previous year data also and the current year data also and only then do any analysis. That is called retrospective. That change you have to change. You have to change what? You have to change past also and you have to change current also. That is the meaning of retrospective application. This is the meaning of retrospective application. And the same thing you have to do here as well. When in terms of prior period error, if you found some error in the previous year data, it has just come to light. So what you have to do, you have to change the past data also and current data. 2005 data also you will make changes. 2006 data also you will make changes. But only in the case of estimate, here you will not make any change to past data.
That's data.
You will only change current data. That's it.
ठीक
That
है.
is called as a prospective change. You will only change current data. Only 2006 data will be changed. You do not even touch 2005 data when we're talking about estimate. But when you're talking about policy or prior period error, you have to change both the data, 2005 also, 2006 also.
Right.
So this is the logic, and we have a couple of questions based on this. First, they're talking about estimate. So just for as per understanding, how do you think what is the application of a change in estimate? How is it applied? Where is it applied? Previous year or current year or future year? Where how is a change in estimate treated? Change in estimate, how is it treated?
Future years.
There's nothing to do with future year, ma'am. I just gave you a just to confuse you. I told future year.
अच्छा,
There is no
current.
change. Yeah, there's only past and current year. There's no future year at all. There's only past data, there's only current year data. Like I told you, there will 2006 data will be given and 2005. When you prepare a balance sheet of 2006, whenever you prepare a balance sheet of 2006, so obviously there will be 2006 data because you're preparing the balance sheet of 2006, but also there will be 2005 data. So
Hmm.
there will be current year data and past year
And
data.
1 year back. Huh.
Yes, future year is not come yet. 2007 has not happened
How
only
will
yet.
I make it? Huh.
Exactly. So you are in 2006 and you are making the report card of 2006. However, in your report card of 2006, your 2005 marks will also be given.
Yeah.
That's how you look at it. When your 2006 report card is there, in that report card only 2005 marks is also given. They cannot give you 2007 marks because you have not even gone to 2007 yet. You have not promoted yet. So there will only be past data and current data. They cannot be future data when we're talking about change in accounting policy. So in 2006 you have changed your accounting policy. In 2006 you have changed your accounting policy. So what you do is obviously 2006 data will already be changed because of the application of the new policy. You have to go and change the 2005 data also. You have to make the adjustments and only then do the comparison. Only first you have to change and then compare. You cannot compare without changing. So you have to adjust the 2005 data and then compare with the 2006 data. Adjust with 2005 data and then compare with 2006 data. So this happens in accounting policy. Whenever there is a change in accounting policy, whenever there's change in accounting policy, this happens. And also whenever there's a prior period error that you found out a prior period error. So this is the treatment that we do. Okay, so whenever there's a change in accounting policy or there's a prior period error, you adjust the 2005 data as well. And then you compare it with 2006 data. 2006 data is anyway prepared as per the changed policy or the prior period error. But 2005 error or 2005 data also needs to be changed. So that happens in change in accounting policy where if this year 2006 you have changed any policy, so before doing any comparison with 2005 you have to change the 2005 data also based on this policy. What the data would have been had this policy been in place in 2005, how would the 2005 data look like? and then you compare it. Next, prior period error, you find out that in 2005 there was some error in these figures. This 100 was not 100, it was 109, or this 100 was not 100, it was 23 or 83 or 95. There's some mistake you found out and it has just come to light. So not only will you change the data and correct the data in 2005, you will also correct the data of 2006, because the 2005 data closing figure flew to 2006 opening figure. So whenever there's a prior period error or there is a change in accounting policy, how do you treat it? You do it retrospectively. What is retrospectively? It means you change both the year's data, the current year also and the past year also. That is the meaning of retrospective application. Application of what? The change in accounting policy. Whenever there's a changes in accounting policy, how do you apply it? You apply it retrospectively. And what does retrospectively mean? That you change both the past data and the current data. Same, whenever there's a change in estimate, you apply it prospectively. What does that mean? That you only change the current data. And next, whenever there's a prior period error that has just come to light, you again, the application of this prior period error is retrospectively. What that means is that again you change the past data and the current data before making any comparison. Before making any comparison. Hope it's clear, ma'am.
Yeah, it's clear now.
Okay. So now they are asking, there is a change in accounting estimate. So tell me, whenever there's a change in accounting estimate, how will you apply this change?
Change in my current data
Only.
only.
Change in current data only, or you apply it prospectively. That means you only change the current year data. So here it is reported prospectively. A is the right option. Change in accounting estimate, it is reported prospectively. No restatement of prior period statement is necessary. You don't need to go and change your prior period data. Were you able to relate, ma'am, right now? The concept and this question?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Okay, we just did a Schweizer sum. Okay. Okay, now again coming to the core sums here. A company to change an accounting policy. So before anything, ma'am, whenever there's a change in accounting policy, how is that change applied in the financial statement? What is the application? Retrospective or prospective? When we talk about accounting policy, how is the change applied?
Sorry.
Retrospectively or prospectively?
If there is a change in accounting principle, then it is to be retrospective.
Whenever there's a change in accounting policy, the application of the change is in retrospective. Absolutely
Yes,
right. And what does retrospective means? That not only current
past,
year data will be changed,
past as well.
past will also be changed. So here they are telling that you have to restate past year data as well. So hence option C is the right option. That you have to not only change this year data, prior period shown in the report will also be changed. You have to restate. The technical word is restate. When I said adjusted and modified, the more appropriate textbook word for it is restate. So not this year, so anyways, automatically you have made based on the current policy. But previous year also you will restate. You will
Hmm.
restate the previous year. You will restate. You will restate the prior period shown in the report. You will restate. Prior period shown in the report, you will restate. Okay. So this is again to the similar concept. Moving on. So this is the end of the 6 questions. Now we are moving on to the second half. So here we start the concept of EPS. EPS is nothing but earnings per share. EPS is nothing but earnings per share. So how does our income look like? P&L account, if I tell you the P&L account, how does a P&L account look like? If I talk about P&L account, how does a P&L account look like? So first there will be sales. From the sales, when you remove COGS, you will get gross profit. From the gross profit, when you remove SAD. Now what is SAD? So if you remove any selling expenses, you remove selling expenses.
SDNA is this only, no?
Yeah, selling and administrative expenses. Or you remove administrative expense and you remove any distribution expense. पूरा गेट बंद कर दो. So when you remove all this from the gross profit, the answer that you get is operating profit. So from sales, when you remove COGS, from sales, when you remove COGS, you get gross profit. So from sales, when you remove COGS, you get gross profit. From COGS, when you remove SAD, from COGS, when you remove SAD, you get operating profit. Okay, since all of them is subtracted, I'll put all of them in bracket. So from sales, when you remove COGS, you get gross profit. From sales, when you remove COGS, again, it's subtracted. Cost of goods sold. So from sales, when you remove COGS, you get gross profit. From gross profit, when you remove SAD, you get operating profit. And from operating profit, when you remove IT, when you remove IT. Now what is I? What is T? I is interest expense. Interest expense. And then when you remove tax. So from operating profit, when you remove IT, the profit that you have is called as net profit. So these are the three profits, and this is the format of your P&L account also. So these are the items that will be in your P&L. So it starts with sale. When you remove COGS, you get gross profit. From gross profit, when you remove SAD, from gross profit, when you remove SAD, you get your operating profit, and from operating profit, when you remove IT, you get your net profit. So now this is called as a profit for the year. Net profit is your profit for the year. After tax, how much profit you will take home. This is your profit for the year after paying everybody. Profit for the year that you take home. Okay. So now from this profit, some part of it is retained in the company. Some part of it is retained in the company. So that company can grow. Some money it will keep it with itself. Remaining money is given to shareholders as dividends. Shareholders have put the money in the company, made the company what it is by giving it the money that it needed to do the operations in the first place. So whatever profit the company makes, something is retained in the company and some are given out. Dividends are given out to whom? To shareholders. Okay. So now in the shareholders, there are two types of shareholders. One are preference shareholders and one are equity or common shareholders, ordinary shareholders. Ordinary shareholders. So now what happens with preference shareholders is they have a fixed dividend that even if the company makes 100 crore, they if the company makes let's say 1 crore, they will still get their 10,000 only as dividends. If the company makes 10 crore, they will still get their 10,000 rupees only as dividend. And if the company makes 100 crores, they will still get their 10,000 only as dividends. These are preference shareholders. But if we talk about equity shareholders, they have a percentage. So when 1 crore is made, if you say 10%, so when a company makes a profit of 1 crore, the equity shareholder who has a 10% ownership, he will make 10 lakhs. When the company makes 10 crore, this person will make 1 crore. And when the company makes 100 crores, this person makes 10 crores. Right? So this is the investor who stand to earn the most when the company grows. These are called ordinary shareholders. These are the true owners of a business. That when the company does more, they also get paid more. Whereas if you see preference shareholders, their dividends will be fixed. No matter how much the company profits the company makes, their dividends will be fixed. Here, if also the company makes zero, no profit, if the company has made a loss that year, there is zero profit, they will also not get anything, they will also not get anything. But only if the company has not earned anything, none of them get anything. So dividends only come in times of profit. They will also get zero and they will also get zero. No one gets anything. However, when the company does make profit, who is preferred? The preference shareholders are preferred. The preference shareholders are preferred. So first, the preference shareholders will get their 10,000. In that, whatever is remaining goes to the ordinary shareholders. First, the preference shareholders will be paid, and whatever is remaining goes to the ordinary shareholders. And here we calculate EPS. When I say earning per share, we find out how much money is available for the ordinary shareholders. So what do? We take the net profit from this. How much of a company made profit? We take the net profit for the year. In this, if the company has retained something, we remove that. And then whatever company has given the preference shareholders as dividends that is paid to preference shareholders, we subtract all that. So whatever is remaining is the dividend for the ordinary shareholders, and we divided it by the number of shares. We divide it by the number of shares. This is called as EPS.
So the people who have ESOPs,
Yeah.
are they can they, are they the preferred ones?
The people who have ESOPs. Now, what is ESOPs? ESOPs basically you have share option plans, right? So what you can do is you can buy a share uh, at a discounted value,
Ah,
right? Share options. They're also called as stock options. So here what happens is, now for example, in 2025 I want to start my company, so I will give people ESOPs. Let's say I can't pay you salary right now, but I'll give you ESOPs. In 2025, I'll tell them that 2 years later you can buy my shares at 100 per share only. You can buy my shares at 100 rupees per share. I'll give you my shares at that price. To 2025, I'll give them that option. That see, you work with me after 2027, or let's say after 2028, post 2028, you can buy the share of my company at 100 rupees per share. If the price of my share is 1000, 10,000, 1 lakh, or 1 crore, the price per share, I will still give you the share at 100 rupees per share. That is the meaning of ESOPs. Were you able to understand, ma'am? What does ESOP mean?
yeah, yeah.
Right? That no matter whatever the price of my share, I will give you the option that you can buy the shares of my company at 100 rupees per share, even if its market value is 1000, 10,000, 1 lakh, or 1 crore, you can still buy one share of my company at 100 rupees. That is the meaning of ESOPs. That whatever value is created, you will get all the benefit of that value just at 100 rupees. So you can buy a share worth rupees 10 lakhs just for rupees 100. You can buy that share worth rupees 10 lakhs. That is the meaning of ESOPs. So ESOPs are again a way of compensating the employees. ESOPs is nothing but a way of compensating the employees. So that is the meaning of ESOPs. Now coming to your questions, now that we've got what is ESOPs out of the way, are you clear, ma'am? What is the meaning of ESOPs in the first place?
Yes.
That in 2025, I'll give you an option that once 3 years have passed, after 2028, you can buy the share of my company at 100 rupees per share. Because we'll work for 3 years, we'll try to maximize the share price, and I'll give you the benefit that if worth something worth rupees 1 crore, you can buy it for 100 rupees. Something worth rupees 10 lakhs, you can buy it for 100 rupees. So that is the meaning of share option plan, wherein you can buy something in the future for a price that we decide today. So if in the future the price of that same thing has gone up, so that gives the employee also the incentive to work hard for the company, because he also knows that if the company grows, the value of my option will also become more valuable, right? I can buy if the company's share price become 1 lakh. If I work hard today and if the share price improves, Then when I exercise my option 3 years later, I will get a higher value thing at a lower price. So even the employee has an incentive to work really hard for 3 years and give it his all. Because if the share price has gone up after 3 years, if it has become 1000, lucky for you, you will still buy the shares at 100 rupees. And if you immediately sell it in the market, you can make 900 rupees immediately. So that's how it works. That 3 years you give your whole and soul, let the share price increase in the market, and then after 3 years, if you want, I will give you the share of my company in 100 rupees. You can immediately go to the market and sell it off for 1000 rupees, which is the market price at that point. Or if the market price is 10,000, I'll give it to you for 100 rupees. You go and sell it in the market at 10,000, which will be the market price. Or if the prices of the share has become 1 lakh after 3 years, I will still give you the share at 1 lakh. If you want, you can go and sell it in the market for 1 lakh rupees. But you will only get it for 100 rupees. That's it. So that is the meaning of share options. Okay, so this share options comes under, there are two types of EPS. One is basic EPS, one is dilutive EPS. So this share option comes under dilutive EPS, which we'll just touch upon in a minute. So first we need to understand your journey till EPS. That have we understood the journey till EPS? So this is the first important
Yes.
point that we need to establish. That have we reached EPS? So now how do we reach EPS? Is that first see company sold. Apple sold iPhones, but first Apple produced iPhones. So by selling the iPhone, what was the sale cost? What was COGS? When you subtract, you get gross profit. From gross profit, when you subtract SAD, you get operating profit. From operating profit, when you remove IT, that is interest and tax, you will get your net profit. So this is the final after paying everybody. This is the money that the company can take home. But some part of the profit the company keeps in the company itself. This is called retained earnings. These are retained in the company. After, like for example, 100 rupees was the profit. In this 100, company kept 10 rupees and remaining 90 were distributed. The company kept 10 rupees and remaining 90 were distributed to the shareholders. So in this 90, 5 rupees is fixed. For preference shareholder, he'll always get 5. Whether the company makes 100 rupees profit or 1000 rupees profit, this guy will only get 5. So in this case, 85 went to the ordinary shareholders. 85 rupees went to the ordinary shareholders. Next year again, the company made 1000 rupees as profit. Next year, the company made 1000 rupees as profit. Here and 10 and this time 100 rupees the company retained. So 900 was distributed. So 900 was distributed. But this time also the preference shares will only get 5. 895 will go to the ordinary shareholders. So from the profit, after removing whatever was retained, whatever money is left to be distributed, from this when we removed whatever goes to the preference shareholders, whatever is left over would be for ordinary shareholders. So we are finding how much money per share is left for ordinary shareholders. So we write, when we take the net profit, as you can see NP, we subtract the retained earnings that was saved in the company. From this we subtract the dividend that we pay to the preference shareholders and then divide it by the number of shares the company has. So we'll know per share how much money. For example, company has 1000 shares. So if we just look into this example, the net profit was 1000. From this, the retained earnings was 100. The company kept it with itself. And among this, 5 rupees also they have given to preference shareholders. And the company has 1000 shares. This divided by 1000. So what is the earning per share, ma'am, of this company? Calculate the earning per share and tell me.
Yeah, so it will be 1000 minus 105 by 1000, which is 900. Just a sec. 0.89, 0.9.
This is the EPS. This is the final answer. did we understand the concept of EPS, ma'am? That from the net income, we removed if anything is retained, if at all it's given in the question. From that, we also remove whatever is given to the preference shareholders. After that, whatever money is left, that is for the ordinary or the common shareholders. So we just divide it by the total number of common shares so that each common share, how much will he get? See, 10 crore is for the entire building, but per floor, how much money are you giving? So per share, how much money will the shareholder get? That is called earning per share. So how much will a shareholder, common shareholder earn per share that he holds? Okay. Okay. So just take me through this cycle, ma'am. What have you understood from profit for the year till preference and ordinary shares? Just this cycle. You take the profit for the year and what?
So once I know my profit, I have an option to put some part of it in my company, which can be
Right.
called as retained income. The
Yes.
remaining I can choose to give as dividend
Right.
to my shareholder. And when I talk about my shareholders, they are of two types. One is preferred shareholder, the other one is ordinary.
Okay.
Uh, so for the preferred shareholder, the amount I'm giving it to them is fixed irrespective of the profit I make. But the
Right.
ordinary one, the dividend I'll pay them uh, will be basically in direct proportion to the income my company is making.
Right. Okay. So that's about ordinary shareholder. When we talk about EPS, what we really want to find out is that these ordinary shareholders, how much money is allocated to them, how much of the earnings is allocated to them. Okay, so in this case, we will say 1000 was allocated to the entire company that made profit. From this, we had given around 100, we had, what do we say, retained, and from the 100, after the we had retained, and another 5 we had paid the preference shareholders. So this will tell us how much money is available for the ordinary shareholders. Are you clear with this logic, ma'am?
Hmm.
How much money is left for the ordinary shareholders from the profit of the company? From the profit of the company, how much money is left for the ordinary shareholders? From the
Hmm.
profit of the company, how much money is left for the ordinary shareholders? That is called as earnings. When we
I
say
have a.
per share,
Hmm.
we
Hmm.
just divided it by the number of ordinary shares, right? When we say per share, we just divide it by the number of ordinary shares.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I take
I,
class for
hmm.
90 minutes
Hmm.
and there are 5 students. So ideally 18 minutes would be per student,
Hmm.
right? So they don't want to know how much my class is. They want to know per student how much time I can allocate. So we find earnings per share. So the number of shares we have to just divide it with. Hence it's called EPS, earnings per share. So the per share will always remind you that you have to divide it by the total number of shares.
So I just have a question. So when we
Yeah,
invest in stock markets and
yeah,
companies pay us dividend also, right?
yeah,
So it's like dividend per share, I get something.
correct.
But there will be EPS also for my investments, right? Because I'm just trying to understand in practical sense, what does EPS mean to me as an investor in a
Okay,
stock market?
okay. So now you want to know that the company made a profit of 1000. Okay, the
Hmm.
company made a profit of 1000. The company is giving out 800. You want to know as an investor what percentage of the profit is the company giving to you.
Ah.
If the 1000 rupees was the profit of the company for financial year 2025, in that 800 is allocated to all the ordinary shareholders. Only 800.
Hmm.
So you want to know that how much percentage of the profit will be allocated to the ordinary shareholders. Beyond this, you want to know that per share how much money will you get. If you hold 10 shares, how much will you get? And if you own 100 shares, how much will you get? So they have 3 checkpoints. One, you want to know how much profit did the company make. That is a fundamental thing you would want to know. Next, you'd want to know that from the profit, how much will you take home? how much will you take home? And from the take home, you want to know how much will you take home per share that you own. So this is what EPS does. It tells you that from whatever the company generated, how much you are able to take home.
पर जो what I am taking home as a shareholder,
Hmm.
it is inclusive of the dividend also, na? Because suppose one company, let's take say Coal India.
Hmm.
So Coal India would pay me dividend, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But if I hold share of Coal India,
That is capital gains. They are two separate things. I get your point. See, now capital gains, and so whenever you buy stock of a company, for example, you bought a stock of Coal India at 100 rupees, and you bought this in 2025. Okay, in 2030, the price the price has become 500. Okay, so your capital gain is 400. This is called capital gain. Okay, are we clear with capital gain? That you purchase the share for 100 in 2025, in 2030 it has become 500. So in over 5 years you have earned 400 rupees. This is your value created. Are we clear?
hmm,
However, this is only one form of income. Capital gain is one form of income. There's another form of income that you make when you invest money. Those are called as dividends.
hmm,
That means in 2025 that you invested, then 2026, 2027, 2028, 2029, 2030. Okay, so here your share. So here, when you bought the share for 100 in 2025, okay, and in 2030, 500 has become the share price. So let's have a trajectory that in 2026 the share price became 200, then it became 300, then it became 400, then it became 450, and then it became 500. So this is your share price. Irrespective of the share price, company will give you some dividends. What was the dividend? 2025 company gave a dividend of 10 rupees per share. In 2026 company gave a dividend of 5 rupees per share. 2027 no dividend was given. 2028 no dividend was given. 2029 again you got 10 rupees per share as dividend. And in 2030 again you got you got 20 rupees per share as dividend. So these are two separate forms of income. For example, if you have a YouTube channel, you earn in two ways. One way is you get view per view, right? If you get 10 lakh views, maybe you get 250 rupees for that 1 lakh or 10 lakh views. That is via views. The other way you earn is through endorsements. That if some brand comes to you and tell you to advertise their products, that is also one source of income. Similarly, when you invest in Coal India, there are two types you can make money. First form of income is via capital gains, that you buy something for 100 and it has become 500. That is capital gains. Next is dividends. What is dividend? Is that on a regular basis, the company, whenever they make a profit, they will give you some money out of the profit also. So that is totally independent of the share price. Share price will have its own course. However, in between, whenever the company makes a profit, they give some dividend as well. So dividend is separate and share price is separate. The growth in share price. So when you calculate your income totally, that I invested 100 in 2025, on that I earned two things. On this 100 rupees I earned two things. First, I earned 400 rupees of capital gain. What was 100 is now 500, so I have created value of 400. Along with 400, I have made 10, 15, 25, 45 plus 45 rupees I have earned as a dividend, as a dividend as well. So my total income from my investment will be, of the 100 I invested, back in my pocket I got 445 rupees. And when you find a percentage of this would be 4.45% is your total earnings per share that you invested 100 rupees. 5 years later, you not only earned 400 as a capital gain, but you also earned 45 rupees as your dividend. Not only have you earned 400 rupees as capital gain, you also earned 45 rupees as your dividend. So 445 is your total income that you earned by just investing 100 rupees. Today you gave 100 rupees. 5 years later, when you came back, that 100 rupees became 445. But this 445 consists of two things. 400 is the capital gain, 45 is the dividend. So when you invest in a share, you earn money two ways. One is via capital gain, one is via dividend. So at the end of 5 years, when you sit and think about it, that hey, I just invested 100 rupees, and 5 years later, I am sitting with 445 rupees. So my money has become four times. So these are the two types of gains. And this
Sorry,
is what
when you did 4.45, you divided it by.
100, what you invested.
Oh, okay, the initial thing.
Yeah, what you invested, it becomes four times.
Mm.
Right? I just didn't want to get into decimal and everything because we are trying to understand the concept here. That's it.
So
So
EPS will fit into, how will the concept of EPS fits here?
EPS is primarily just concerned with dividends. That of whatever the company earned, how much company gave me. In 2026, company gave me 10 rupees, but how much did the company earn? Company earned 10,000 rupees, but it gave me only 10 rupees. 2026, company earned 5,000 rupees, but it gave me only 5 rupees. Company earned 8,000 rupees, but it only gave me 10 rupees. So how much earnings, how much ever the profit the company has made, out of that profit, how much money is left from this profit, how much money is left for the ordinary shareholder? That is what EPS help us calculate.
But
That
in the
whatever the,
formula,
yeah,
we are subtracting dividends. So we are talking about the money
for
uh,
ordinary shareholders.
for ordinary shareholder.
Yeah. See, if you're a preference shareholder, your EPS calculation will not be the same. We are just calculating that
Ultimately,
whatever profit the
we are
company
doing,
made,
okay.
how much is kept for the ordinary shareholders. If my mother made 10 chapatis, how much chapati is just left for me? I am the fifth member in the family. So if my mom made 10 chapatis, what will I subtract? How much my mom ate, how much my dad ate, how much my brother ate, how much my sister-in-law ate. After that, whatever is left would be for me. Same thing is happening here, that whatever profit the company made, how much ever money the company generated, how much of that is left for the ordinary shareholders. How do we
Okay,
get it? We subtract everyone in between. We just remove their shares. We
right.
remove whatever goes to him, whatever goes to how much my mother ate, how much my brother ate, how much my sister-in-law ate, how much my dad ate. I remove all that. Whatever is remaining is for me to eat. So whenever I go to the kitchen, I ask, did everyone eat? So if everyone ate, I know whatever is remaining is completely for me. That is what we are exactly finding.
Understood. So someone like me who
Yeah.
invests in share market,
Yeah.
what category of shareholder I am?
Ordinary
Or
share, it depends. You can buy preference share also, but generally what people buy is ordinary shares. You're an
ordinary
ordinary
share.
shareholder. Yeah, so you are an ordinary shareholder. So whatever the company has, so how much ever chapatis that were prepared, from that chapati I removed how much everyone ate. I remove how much everyone ate. So I know how much chapati is left for me, and I am the ordinary shareholder. So I remove from the profit that how much my mother made, that is the profit. From this I remove first how much was the retained earnings, how much my dad ate. From this I removed how much my siblings ate. And then whatever is left, I know, okay, this is for me. So that is what is exactly happening. From the profit, net income, I remove whatever was retained, whatever was for the preference shareholders after giving everyone their dues. What is left for the ordinary shareholders? That is what we are finding via EPS, earnings per share. Okay, so as we go into this concept in detail, you'll understand, but all I'll say is for at this level, you just need to have the clarity of this area completely. Just this, that you have sales, when you remove COGS, you have gross profit. From gross profit, when you remove SAD, you have operating profit. From operating profit, when you remove IT, you finally get to net profit. This is the total number of chapatis. From this, I will remove what was retained and what was given to the preference shareholders. After removing that, I will know what is left for the ordinary shareholders. But there are many ordinary shareholders. You purchased the share, so even I purchased the share. Even Ram purchased the share. Even Afi purchased the share. Even Jay purchased the share. So per head, how much are we getting? So hence we divide this total earnings for ordinary shareholders. We divide it by the number of shares. We divide it. We divide this by the number of shares. We divide this by the number of ordinary shares that, so we will know per share how much money we will make. This is called earning per share. So how much have the company made out of this? How much has the company distributed to ordinary shareholders, not to other people, but just to ordinary shareholders. So from the net income, I remove whatever company kept with itself, whatever it paid a preference dividend holders, and then whatever is left over is mine to keep. And now also here there are many ordinary shareholders. All of us have understood the CFA. We all studied CFA. We all understood ordinary shares is a better place to invest. All of us invested. So now we want to know per head how much we will get. So hence we do number of shares. Okay. So this is purely from a dividend perspective. That whatever company earns, how much does it give out as dividends? Nothing to do with your capital appreciation. That goes on parallelly. That is a totally separate thing, that your share price is increasing. That is a separate thing. Here, by EPS, when we only talk about dividends. What are dividends? Part of earnings that the company pays to shareholders. Part of earnings that the company pays to shareholders. Were you able to get the clarity, ma'am? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was a little about basic EPS. So now we have a sum here. You have to just find the basic EPS. Like we know what is EPS. What is the amount of money that was left for the ordinary shareholders per share? So here Flamingo Products had a net income of 10 lakhs. So 1 million is the net income. So the net income is 1 million. Okay, like we understood here, the net profit for the year, net income is 1 lakh. Oh, sorry, 10 lakhs. From this 10 lakhs, what happened? And there were around 10 lakh shares, 10 lakh income. Sorry, 10 lakh was your profit and 10 lakh was your share, number of shares. Okay, so your denominator was also 10 lakh, your numerator was also 10 lakh. Your number of shares was also 10 lakhs, and your net income for the year was also 10 lakhs. Now, in July 2009, the company issued 10,000 new shares. So now new shares were issued. So now more shares, more people came to eat in my house. New guests have come to my house now. So the profit is the same. My mother made that many chapatis only. But now we have more people who have come to eat. Okay, so now what happens is per person gets little less now. Okay, so the company issued 1 lakh new shares for 2000 for $20. So new shares were issued at $20. Okay, so let's just quickly write it down. So the net income, how much the company made was 10 lakhs. Okay, how many were number of shares? This was also 10 lakhs. Okay, so this was the basic scene. The 10 lakh shares, 10 lakh was the profit. So this was the basic. So now what happened here? On July 2009, this was on 1st Jan. All this was in January. All this was in January. So now what is happening in July? What they're saying in July, what happened? To each of them, what happened in July? To each of them, what happened in July? So in July, the number of shares increased. How many? 1 lakh shares. So now total number of shares has become 1 lakhs. 11 lakhs, sorry. Total number of shares has now become 11 lakhs in July. My net income has not changed at all. Only though my assets have changed, though I've raised money, but it does not impact net income. Though people paid these 20 rupees, per person paid 20 rupees. 1 lakh people paid 20 rupees per share, right? So though my cash has increased, cash is an asset. No income, no effect on net income. Net income has nothing to do with my cash that I have raised. So now they are asking the company paid 2 lakhs in dividends to common shareholders. So to common shareholders, company has paid. What is the basic earnings per share? So now here the company has paid to common shareholders. Who are common shareholders? Common shareholders are the final shareholders whose income we want to find. Common shareholders, not preference shareholders. So if we just stick to the formula, net income is given. 10 lakhs is my net income. This is all good. This is clear. Preferred dividend is not given. See, this dividend of 2 lakhs is to common shareholders, not to preferred. Right? This is a trick question. Here they have given you common shareholders, but in the formula, what do you subtract? Even if you look here, what have we subtracted? The preferred shareholders is what we have
Preferred.
subtracted. We have not subtracted the ordinary shareholder dividend. So this 2 lakhs is not something that you will subtract. That is not something that you will subtract. So your net income will only be in the numerator. Now coming to denominator, here this says weighted average number of shares. Weighted average. So at the start of the year was 10 lakhs, and this was there for the entire year. This 10 lakhs was there for start to end, full year. But however, out of this 11 lakhs, this was issued after half the year, right? This was issued after half the year. This was issued in July, after June, like 6 months later. So when we calculate, when we take the weighted average number of shares, we will take this as 12 by 12 because this 10 lakhs was there throughout the year, but this 11 lakh shares
We'll take 6.
6 by 12. Okay. So these new shares that were issued, how many new shares were issued here? Uh, 1 lakh new shares were issued. So 1 lakh new shares were issued. If we just take the new number of shares only in July, in this we will do 6 by 12. So these 1 lakh shares were there only for 6 months. So this will be to do 6 by 12 and these will do 12 by 12 because they were there for the entire year. So here we will have 1 lakh shares. Sorry, this will be same as 10 lakh shares that were there because we are doing 12 by 12. 12 by 12 is 1. So nothing changes. These shares are there throughout the year. However, these 1 lakh shares, we will only take 50,000 here because we are taking a weighted average. We will only take 50,000 here. Why will we take 50,000? Because we are only taking for 6 months.
It's 6 months.
Exactly. So my total number of shares would be 10 lakh 50,000. 10 lakh 50,000 would be my total number of shares. So my denominator is sorted. So I got my denominator. I weighted average the number of shares. So here in Jan there were 10 lakh shares and those shares were there throughout the year. Nothing happened to them. So these were 10 lakhs. But these shares were only issued in July. So I will only take 6 by 12. I'm weighting them based on the number of months they were with me. So only 6 by 12. So I will take only 50,000 from this share. So total number of shares is 10 lakh 50,000. That is the denominator. Net income is given. Preferred dividends is not given. So net income is already 10 lakhs divided by 10 lakh 50,000. So you will see 10 lakhs divided by 10 lakh 50,000. 0.95 is your basic EPS. So what was trick here? They gave you dividend, but you will not subtract the dividend. Why? Because the dividend that they gave you was for common shareholders. But when you find EPS, you only subtract the retained earnings and you subtract the dividend that was given to preferred shareholders. But here, how did they trick you? They gave you dividend, but this was for common shareholders. But we will only subtract dividend that were given to preferred shareholders, not common shareholders. So this is the first trick over here. This was the first trick that I put in red. Second trick that these were issued only in July. So you will only take 6 months. This is the second trick. That when you take the weighted average, you will take these 1 lakh shares only for 6 months. You'll take only half of it, 50,000, because these were in July. Had these were in September, you would have only taken for 3 months. So this is how you weight them. You weight them on the basis of number of months. So you take a weighted average. So 10 lakh 50 would be your denominator. Net income was given. Preferred dividend was a trick. They are not giving you only preferred dividends. Were you able to understand, ma'am?
Yeah.
Net income is clear, it was directly given. Preferred dividend was not given. Weighted number of shares, again, they gave you. In Jan, what was issued, that was there for the entire year. July, what was issued, was only there for 6 months. Hence, you only take 6 by 12, you weight them. And then you add your total number of shares, and this formula was just given here. So, this is how you do it. Okay, let's try one sum on our own, and let's see if we get it. Okay, we don't have a basic EPS. Okay, this is from ACCA. I think there's a EPS chapter here. Yes, earnings per share, chapter 14. So let's try to do a sum. Again, it's the similar concept. It's a chartered accountancy course. So if we understand. So if we take earnings per share here. Okay. So now we can do have a single year sum. Yeah, this is better since we have only for single year. So let's get started now. Let's try to just solve this before we close. So now Gerard's earnings. So there's a company called Gerard's. Okay. And the year end is 31 December 2004. This is the year end. Okay. There's a company called Gerard and the year is 31 December. Okay. And their earnings for the year is 22 lakhs 8,000. So ma'am, where does this fall into the formula when I say earnings?
NI.
Perfect. So net income is done. Ticked off. Net income is done. On 1st January now, so at the start of the year they are telling, they issued share capital of 828,000. Ordinary shares of $1 each. So this is the number of shares at the start of the year. Are you with me, ma'am, on this? This was there for the entire year. Okay, this 82 lakh shares were there for the entire year. This will take in full. However, in same 6 months later, the company issued another 33 lakhs 12,000 shares. So you will only wait this for 6 months, right? So now it's ditto sum. I'm trying to solve this. Try to solve this. It's a ditto sum from there. I'll just get this there, and you
One.
can use the reference so that you will don't have to do everything from memory. Use a reference. So I'll just paste it here.
So it is
You just take half of this 33 12,000 into 6 by 12. That's roughly 50% of this. So you'll get 16 lakhs, not 16 lakhs. How much ever you get when you divide by 2, you should get 2 ones are 2, 2 ones are 2, 6, 16 lakh 56,000. 16 lakh 56,000 plus 8 lakh 28. That will be your 82 lakhs. That would be a total number of shares. Half of this 33 12,000. 16 lakh 56,000. And here 82 lakhs. So 82 plus 16, 98. 98, you should get more than 10 lakh shares if you just add both. And that divided by 22 lakhs and the number of shares. That's it. It's a ditto sum that we have taken. January, June, January, June. Here, however, they have just not given the uh, dividends to confuse you. That's it.